And welcome into the roundtable. And one of the topics of discussion that we have quite frequently here on the show is driver recruitment. But how is that going to change, if it will change, in 2024? Joining us to talk about it, Jeremy Raymer, founder of Driver Reach, joins us, as well as Subedi Mawala, the VP of Client Success at Transportation Marketing Group. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Jeremy, let me start with you and just kind of give us what you think is the state of recruiting in a time right now where the market certainly would benefit from some capacity leaving at this point in time.
Yeah, we're all, at least I feel like while there's not necessarily light at the end of the tunnel, there certainly seems to be this expectation that sometime middle to the second half of next year, perhaps, that we'll see this softening sort of subside. That being said, I think what companies are going to continue to do, as they've started doing probably second half of this year, is really focus on optimizing their operations. And when it comes to recruiting, certainly leveraging technology, being far more disciplined with their spend, and then also being more selective to ensure that they've got the types of drivers that really have the safe and have the staying power to continue on through this period.
So, Betty, what do you think as you look at this entire landscape at this particular point? Again, capacity seemingly, I mean, everybody would like capacity to kind of drop out a little bit to try and normalize things, but then again, you still have to recruit.
So it's been tough. I think in this market, you have to really focus on your branding. And, you have to get your name out there. You have to get the positive things, about what makes sense, to work for your carrier and highlight, what makes you guys special as a carrier. And so, get your drivers on there, attack social media. There's a lot of drivers on Facebook, and the major social media platforms that, I feel like carriers are not taking advantage of. Get someone on your team to, interview these drivers, get real authenticity out there into the market and, try to get the best quality drivers that you can.
Jeremy, maybe a few times before that we had you on with Leah Shaver, I asked an interesting question, and you guys came up with an interesting answer. If I gave you $100,000, how much of it would you spend on recruiting and how much of it would you spend on retention? That answer that time was 80-20 towards retention. Has that answer changed for you?
It really hasn't. You want to keep the good drivers that you have. I think the luxury that you do have, you don't have to spend as much today as you might have had to a year or two ago from a recruiting standpoint. But if you can attract some of the right drivers, there's the opportunity to sort of upgrade or top grade the bottom performing drivers that you have, whether that's from a safety standpoint or just performance overall.
So, Betty, same question to you. If I gave you $100,000, how much of it would you allocate towards recruiting and how much of it would you allocate towards retaining?
Yeah, I think I agree with Jeremy there. I mean, it's so important that we're surveying our drivers, not just the drivers that we have, but the drivers that we have coming in. And, what attracted you to us? What was it that made you choose, us over other carriers? And then, continue to, do these surveys on a 30 and 90-day basis. How are they feeling after 30 days? What's working for them, what's not? And then after a 90-day period, do it again. Hey, what's working for you, what's not? And continue to leverage, what your drivers are saying and trying to fix those things that, make you guys a great carrier.
How much would you change, Jeremy, in terms of retention and what's going on there as well? Obviously, Subedi with some good advice there. Obviously, keep the feedback coming. But what changes would you make in terms of retention just so that the churn isn't so big and so great as it has been year over year?
Well, I think what's important is certainly, as Seth was saying, you got to get feedback. But then what do you do with that feedback? And I think it's really important that you communicate back to say, here are the things that we can do based on what you've said. We're going to commit to this. And you want them to see these wins, that they know that their voice and their input made a difference. And then also, sometimes there are things that you can't do. And so you need to share that. You need to say, I'm sorry, we can't do this, and here's why. But that open dialogue, and as Max Farrell, a good friend from Workhound, will call that feedback loop, I think that's really important to keep them engaged and feeling appreciated.
Sepp, as you look at this situation, one of the things that we don't necessarily talk about with regard to driver recruitment is geography, and the fact that looking at how we see this the freight landscape changing. Obviously, Laredo seems to be coming online, being the #1 port in America at this particular point, but also given problems at Panama, given what is now happening in LA Long Beach, a lot of those Gulf Coast ports and East Coast ports are not seeing the freight numbers, of course, that they were last year or the year before. In terms of recruitment, how important is location as well as simply getting the drivers there to do the jobs if the freight, again, in the American Southeast probably isn't there volume-wise versus years past?
Sorry, can you rephrase your question?
Sure. If you look at the way that the freight landscape is affecting geographically, you have Laredo, which seems to be coming online and exploding and should be very solid for years to come. But at the same time, the American Southeast seems to be taking the brunt of the fact that LA Long Beach is now operating well. The Panama Canal is not allowing a lot of freight to come to Gulf Coast ports and East Coast ports. How important is geography in recruiting those drivers where freight may not necessarily be where it once was in years past?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, that's something in recruiting that, we constantly look at. I mean, when I was at Yellow, we struggled in the, Pacific Northwest, and you have to constantly look at your competitors and what they're doing and how they're attracting drivers. And then how are you adjusting your message, in those hard to hire areas, if you will, to attract those drivers. And so it's something that you have to constantly look at. You have to look at the numbers. You have to A and B test what's working, what's not, and hopefully, you can get the right formula, if you will, to bring in those drivers in those specific areas.
Jeremy, how much does geography matter?
I mean, it's always a factor, right? I mean, I think it's always going to be a factor in terms of if you've got this great piece of business in the middle of North Dakota. That's going to be tough if it's not in oil. It's going to be a tough job to fill. You're probably going to have to pay a premium. You may have to relocate people, but other than that, if it's in areas where there's generally a large enough population to pull from, especially at this time, I think
Sepp, as you look at it, let's look to 2024 here. What's your strategy, and does your strategy change at all in the new year in terms of what you're using, how you're going after drivers, and how you're keeping them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing going in 2024 is attacking social media. I see some companies are doing it well with TikTok. They're on there, they're getting the voice out there, they're getting their drivers' voices out there. I mean, really, whatever you're hiring, if it's mechanics, etc. You got to get authentic content on there. This is where you got to go where your drivers are, and this is where they are. So having a plan going into 2024, as well as branding, making sure that your brand is strong and that you're constantly putting content out there around that. I think it's going to be important to attack in 2024. And whenever that market is ready to come back, you're ready for it because of that.
Jeremy, what do you see as any changes into the marketing and recruiting of drivers in 2024? Again, given the different environment that we're seeing now as opposed to earlier in the year or last year even.
Yeah, well, and I think it's not so much an issue of the economy soft or not. It's more of a what is working today and how have we evolved. And Sepp nailed it. I mean, social media is really valuable, really important. And the only thing I'd add to that he alluded to, because he said you got to be consistent, or you got to be constant, right? It is you have to be consistent with it. I can't tell you how many times I talk to somebody and they say, we tried that. What, for 3 months? I mean, that's not how it works. You have to do it. You have to commit to it, and it is part of what you do all the time. And then you'll start to bear the fruit from that. And kind of to Sepp's point, you want to remain top of mind. You want to be who they think about if and when, and as we are in this market, when things turn around and things start to really pick up, you want to be who they think of and want to reach out to.
Definitely got to be ready for that there as well. Seppity and Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll look to see how things continue to hopefully improve in 2024.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That'll do it for our roundtable for today. We'll come back and wrap up the show right after this.